It's from our classic album of the day on Six Music, a record which I still believe is one of the best records of the punk era and beyond, actually. A record which expressed not just a sense of almost frustration, but also sketched the landscape of Britain, which was a little grey and a bit cracked. It was a record about, I suppose, being at a crossroads in a way. The album is Crossing the Red Sea with the Adverts. The front man, the wordsmith of the Adverts, TV Smith, is here. Thank you very much for coming in. So One Chord Wonders you just heard. You couldn't have written a better expression of punk, really, as an opening salvo, could you? One Chord Wonders?
Well, I mean, that's what it was. It was starting and we could feel something was in the air, and I wanted to say something about it.
But even then, in its lyrics, there was this, it had the mixture of assurance and insecurity.
Yeah, well, it was, you know, I was cynical. I've always been cynical. That's that's what
from a very early age.
Yeah, I was a cynical baby, actually.
Well, yeah.
My mother tells me. No, I mean, I think you have to always look at things with a cynical eye, really, and because otherwise so much gets thrown at you that actually you don't personally believe in. That you have to look a little sort of aside at the subject. That's what I always tried to do around the time when punk was starting off, and One Chord Wonders was.
Do you think that's one of the reasons why people took to the Adverts and your work, and still do, probably still, you know, these days with your solo work, is that just that slightly wry, slightly cynical eye on things?
Yeah, I think everyone's got that in them. You know, who wants to be part of the mainstream? You know, you just get flushed along with the rest. It's always good to, you know, stand on the side and look at it from outside. I think you can give a more kind of rounded viewpoint if you do that.
It was the first single, obviously, but it's also the first track on the album, which, as I say, it does paint a picture of a country which was, I think, slightly broken, but more than that, it almost hints at parts of society that were just a little bit lost or isolated or had no voice, and sometimes they just weren't using their voice. That's what comes across.
We felt stuck, you know. We felt stuck. If you're growing up in 77, you didn't feel part of this society that was breaking apart. You know, everyone knows about, you know, the bins left on the street. You know,
the strikes,
all the strikes of political unrest. You know, the sense that the country wasn't moving forward and wasn't supporting its youth. You know, we felt part of that. And there was this, you know, great urge from me and lots of other people to create that and put that into music and create a scene where we felt connected in a way, because we weren't feeling we were being connected from above, so we wanted to connect ourselves.
Before we go back to the influence of punk and where you first became a part of the scene, when did you start writing? Did you write at school? Were you encouraged at school?
Yeah, I did. I did write at school. I wrote poetry, first of all, when I was a school kid. And that was kind of the way I expressed myself, first of all, and I've sent up poems to poetry magazines and that kind of thing. And at some point I started realising I was actually putting words to songs that I was hearing on the radio. Right. I thought, well, actually, I think my lyrics are better than theirs, because they were these rubbish pop songs, you know, and I was throwing in these lyrics that were, you know.
I'd love to hear your version of If You Leave Me Now by Chicago or something, which was in the show. But were you encouraged, though, at school? Were you encouraged, or was it just seen as, well, that's just a hobby, you don't worry about that? You know?
No, I think I was fairly encouraged, you know. I mean, I think, you know, good teachers recognise what their pupils are talented at, and I was clearly good at art and literature and rubbish at science and maths and so forth. So, I mean, that was the only way to go, really.
So when did you leave school, and what did you do after that?
Well, I left school and went to art college for a year.
Did you?
To the old traditional way of kids who don't know what they're doing next in life. Yeah. And I'd already had a band at school, and we played our first gig at lunchtime in the school assembly hall. And it was glam, so I dressed up. I put all the glitter and makeup on and had to do the maths lesson, you know, with glitter dripping out of my hair in the afternoon. So then when I went to art college, I didn't really have an art career in mind, but it gave me the freedom to. I immediately started my next band in art college and spent all the time rehearsing. And
how on earth did you end up in Devon then?
I was born in Essex. My parents were both teachers themselves and moved down to Devon.
Right, that's
when I was about 9 years old.
You were born in Romford or somewhere.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So you leave school, you go to art college. So where did you go to art college?
In Torquay.
In Torquay.
Yeah.
So when does punk come along, and what does it mean? How did you discover there was this thing happening?
Well, I had my sort of glam band going in Torquay, really, and getting nowhere. You know, I was playing village halls and this sort of thing, and I remember supporting George Melly. That was the nearest we got to. We got to being in the area that we wanted to be in. And then I think the first, you know, it was clear that nothing was going to happen down there, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, people wanted to hear bands that did covers of Free, you know, or Chicago, like you say, you know. All people wanted was cover bands. And we were doing my own songs, getting nowhere. And then I read the first reports of the Sex Pistols playing in London, And I'd met Gay by then, and she wanted to learn bass, and we just looked at each other and said, we got to get up there. You know?
Did you, because that's the thing, so you moved to London. Did you have any plan of what you were going to do? Did you have anywhere?
Well, I knew we were going to have a band.
Right. You know? Where did you stay? Where did you live?
Well, we did a few kind of sorties up there to try and find somewhere to live, and it was actually extremely difficult. I had like one person I knew up there who went and slept on his floor for a couple of times, and then got a very outrageously expensive rip-off one-room attic flat on a 3-week holiday rent where we could be thrown out of at any time. But luckily that was enough to get our feet under the door and be able to put a band together. So the usual kind of like small lads in sounds and enemy help, need a guitarist.
Doesn't necessarily have to play.
Better not to be able to.
There's two things here. So after you hear punk, you make the decision, you come up to town. But the idea of punk, does that finally give you a voice and an outlet for these lyrics then? So everything that you've been building up to, all the writing, here's purpose and focus.
Well, it gave it an outlet, that much is true. I mean, I was already writing lyrics, and some of the lyrics were completely written before punk rock, and I think I'd written one called Wonders before this kind of punk rock phenomenon actually started, because I was in a band, you know, like I say, come back when you've learnt to play. That's exactly what I was having every night. And so then it's slotted, you know, the thing is you catch the mood. That's how you write a song. You know, you catch the mood, whether it's clear where it's going or not. That's the whole thing, to be in the moment and catch the mood. And so that fitted in perfectly when punk happened, because punk was just an expression of something that had been building up over the previous years. Remember, it didn't come out of nowhere. It came out for a reason, because people were dissatisfied and they wanted change and they wanted to have something new.
I've now got this picture of you in your attic, though, scribbling away, just, you know, through the night, coming up with songs.
An attic is certainly a classic place for a writer, isn't it?
So you form the Adverts, the Adverts being a name where you plucked out of the sky, or was that something which was floating around? What was the...
Well, it's always hard to name a band, of course. We had endless arguments, you know. We were thinking of calling a band One Called Wonders itself for a start. But it just seemed too much of a gimmick, and we didn't want to be seen as a gimmick band, really. So I thought the Adverts had a bit more depth to it, in that, you know, we are being pushed around by the advertising and by what society wants us to believe and what they want us to buy. And so that was the name of that band, really.
You played a number of gigs, around London. You played I was reading somewhere, you played the Roxy 9 times.
We played it a lot of times. We were one of the first bands in fact. We played the first week it opened, we played there twice.
Did you? Because the Roxy was the legendary one, wasn't it? That was the home, really.
That's where it, you know, without the Roxy, there wouldn't have been a punk rock movement. You might have had the Pistols, and you might have had the Jam and the Clash, but there wouldn't have been a movement per se without that place where everyone could go and gather round.
And what was your first gig like?
It was terrible. Everyone thinks the Roxy was like some really happening place, but I mean, the first time we played there was probably about 30 people standing there, and they were halfway back the room, you know. And I was having to walk off stage and cajole them to say, yeah, you lot, come on, get near the stage. And the weird thing was, like, Johnny Rotten was in the audience, and afterwards he said to me, TV, don't get off the stage. The stage is your place.
Really?
So, and I never have since. I think he's absolutely right. You know, every time I see a musician who comes off stage and, you know, goes direct to his audience, saying, "Oh, don't do that. It looks bad. It looks terrible." You know, and it's actually insecurity that makes you want to go out and reach them by being right in front of them. In fact,
because notoriously, people say of you at that time, as read the song, you couldn't play. There's a famous advert, isn't there? For the time you went on tour with the Damned, the Adverts know 1 chord, the Damned know 3. Come and see all 4 chords.
That's right.
Tour. Is that right?
Classic poster as well. Stiff Records were so brilliant at that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, no, we couldn't play. I mean, basically, I mean, Gay learnt guitar to be in the band, so what she learnt was the songs. Laurie basically bluffed his way into the audition because we were desperate for a drummer, and literally learnt to play in the rehearsals. The only one of us who could actually play was Howard, because I couldn't play guitar well enough to play my own songs on stage, so I had to get a guitarist in.
Stiff Records sign you up, you do 1 called Wonders, and then Gary Gilmore's Eyes is the second single. Is that your second single? Or the third one?
That was the
third single. It's early on, though,
I don't know, actually. I can't remember.
It's still 77.
It was the second single.
You haven't been together that long, and Gary Gilmore's Eyes, which is amazing. So it was the first song I ever heard, and I remember thinking, what is this about? This is not what most pop songs are about, because you have to put it in context. Anyway, it goes top 20 for a start. That must be a bit surreal.
Yeah, well,
You've moved to London.
We'd only been going 6 months, and we were on top of the pops all of a sudden. It was certainly weird. You know, we worked for it. You know, in a way, it all made a kind of sense. You know, you could feel you were a part of a movement. You could feel the way it was pushing. And as soon as I wrote Gary Gilmore's Eyes, I thought, well, this is sick, but it's a hit record. You know, even though it's sick, it can get through under the radar as a novelty record.
But most pop records aren't about an American who's demanded to be executed for the murders he's committed, and then has offered up his eyes to medical science. Where did that come from?
Well, I didn't have to make up much, you know. I mean, it's true.
But just the idea, this is what I'm going to write about, because this is what sets you apart from a lot of your peers at the time, whose language was quite brutal in places and abrupt. But you've written this, again, it's almost poetic.
Yeah, well, that's what you do when you write. Something strikes you, you write it out and you push it further and you try and embellish it a bit. And I just like the idea of turning that story, which was absolutely true, you know, and it was being exploited. It was all over the media at the time, you know, because he was a small-town murderer, a bit of a fool, and he killed a couple of people. It was a sad story, actually. But in the end, you know, the Liberals were trying to stop him being executed, trying to get a stay of execution. He was actually going, you know what, I did it, just kill me now, and I will donate my retinas, and at least I've done something good out of my miserable life. That's what he was saying. It was a fascinating story about a very tragic character, and I just thought it was a good thing to write about it and actually turn it into a bit of a sort of a horror story, and also to satirise the way the media were approaching it, which was in a very one-dimensional way. So I thought, if I write a very gothic horror one-dimensional song about it, then that also does a job of satirising the media approach to it.
And to put that into context, in the top 10 the week that's the Adverts top 20, Elvis Presley was at number 1 with Way Down. Float On by the Floaters was number 3. Donna Summer was also in the top 10 alongside Silver Lady by David Soul.
Yeah, there you go.
You're going to stand out.
Those were the days.
You certainly must have stood out when you did Top of the Pops.
They hated us. They absolutely hated us turning up looking like punk rockers and being all moody on stage and refusing to mime, and they hated it.
I watched it last night because everything's online now, and it's. I mean, obviously you know change your memories of these things, but watching it was yes, I remember. He's the man who had all the badges on, hundreds of button badges.
Yeah. And stupid sunglasses, hidden Redbridge sunglasses,
and that clenched teeth style of singing as well.
Yeah, I know. That's where I was feeling actually, because they, I had so much trouble asking to sing live because everyone mimed on Top of the Pops, and I said I was very punk rock. I said I'm not going to sing, I'm not going to mime, I'm going to sing live. So they do all the run throughs, didn't even give me a proper microphone, so I was like there's no voice, and they were telling me off. I was being told off by the floor manager. They finally got a microphone and they put the backing track so quiet I couldn't hear it at all. All I could hear was Laurie behind me going bonka, bonka, bonka. I couldn't hear a thing, so I was absolutely bluffing it. So next time I did it, I mimed.
Lessons learned. Tracks on the record to come after this. We'll play another track from Crossing the Red Sea, and this is one of my favourite songs on the album. What are the scary sounds at the start of this? Bomb Site Boy.
I went out with John Leckie, the producer, and we went out to, we actually decided in very old school way to actually record some railway cuttings, as that's in the lyric, and we went out to a scrapyard in North Latimer Grove, actually, in the middle of the night, with a microphone. It's a bit Pink Floyd, this, actually. I actually went out in the scrapyard and taped the late night trains going by on the Underground.
Because it gives it a really sort of like sinister mood at the start of this record, as you hear from our featured classic album of the day. This is from the Adverts, and this is Bomb Site Boy. It's the Adverts from Crossing the Red Sea, our 6 music classic album of the day. I mean, that's got some of my favourite lyrics from the album. It also, you see, because before you know what it's about, it sounds like a nickname, doesn't it, the Bomb Site Boy? It sounds like something that people would call you. But where did it come from? What inspired the track? Because it's like this weird punk rock Stig of the Dump style tale.
Yeah, well, it's about being an outsider. You know, in post-war London, it was quite usual to have bomb sites left. It was a long time, before they got filled in with lots of money-making housing projects. So actually, I have memories of playing on bomb sites in London and in Essex.
But also it sets the agenda as well. So I can imagine, I'm just, the whole line about not compromising, that was very much about what the Adverts were about. So.
Yeah, in the absence of, feeling that you're a part of anything else, you're very wary of what society tells you to do, and I think it's very, you find your way by deciding that you aren't going to compromise, you're going to be who you are. It was like from this negative feeling that you're lost and you're not part of something, then you can give a positive message that actually I am going to be this, I'm going to be what I want, I'm going to do what I want. Don't be negative. People think punk was a very negative movement, but it wasn't. It was actually a very positive movement. It was people in a bad place saying, no, I'm not accepting this, I'm going to do something with my life.
Yeah. Although it also gives the first indication that this record is as well about the increasing frustrations about punk rather becoming slightly watered down. By the time your album comes out, punk has exploded like a firework. It promised a lot, and for people who were part of it early on, it wasn't panning out as possibly some of you thought it might.
No, not at all. It was such an exciting movement in the first 6 months, and so many bands came up with so many different... I mean, the band, you can't compare the bands. They all had their own sparkle and their own kind of excitement and their own kind of way of songwriting, because if you compare the Damned to the Jam, to the Clash, to the Pistols, to the Adverts, to the Buzzcocks, they all sound completely different. You know, that's the thing. They all had their own story to tell and their own way of telling it. And 6 months later, it was, you know, there was a load of kids thinking, well, if we get a leather jacket and play fast and hard and look mean on stage and spit and stuff, then we'll be a punk band. And that would completely miss the point.
To pick up the story then, because you had lots of labels, didn't you? You went from label to label to label. Because you make your album comes out a lot later than some of the bands that you were probably playing with in 77. Because your album, although recorded in 77, doesn't come out till 78. What caused the delay? Was it just hopping around between labels, or were you always on tour?
One of the problems was that because having a hit single, because the consequence was we were always on tour. I mean, as soon as Gilmore came out, we went out on tour, or even just before, I think, for like 6 weeks with the Damned, supporting the Damned, the real classic tour, and as soon as we had a hit single, well, suddenly you're in demand everywhere, so we were just touring everywhere. We had the songs all ready to go, but no time to go into the studio, so we didn't get a chance to go into the studio until late in 77.
I suppose the upside of that is you can play a bit better by the time they make the album.
That's true. Well,
You've had a few rehearsals.
Exactly, we're rehearsals on stage in front of the audience. Yeah.
You make the album then, it's 77. I don't know exactly when in 77, but I imagine it's late 77.
I think it's December 77.
And you make the record at Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Abbey Road.
Yeah.
Get you the Adverts in Abbey Road.
It was so funny. It was so perfect, actually, that we got there, because we were in very, very safe hands with John Leckie producing, and that was where he liked to work, in Abbey Road, really.
Because was Leckie still... Because he was in the house at Abbey Road, wasn't he, for a while? Was that before he'd left, or did he come back to do you?
That I don't know. Right. I think he was probably still in-house, actually.
Right.
You know, I really wanted John to do it, because I just felt like we would be in a safe pair of hands. I know he'd dealt with bands that could be considered problematical before, like he'd done the Doctors of Madness album, and they were a pre-punk band who were quite notorious for not being great players, you know, but great ideas. So I thought, well, if he can make them sound good, he can make us sound good.
But also, I imagine, because Leckie goes on to work with Public Image Limited, Stone Roses, everyone. But also, I imagine, did he push you? Did he push you with the songs as well a little bit?
We had it pretty much, arrangements we had pretty much sorted out, but there certainly were some special moments that John thought of, thought of ideas for the arrangement that we could never, as, a year-old band, come up with. So his experience in the studio really, really showed.
And what were the other core themes then? If you look back now at that collection of songs, what were you attempting to convey, do you think?
I think I was conveying the sense of a lost generation, really, not knowing where it was going and how to find its feet, in a country that in many ways I felt was equally lost, like the Great British Mistake said. Here is a society where you're supposed to fit in, but society itself doesn't seem to know where it's going. And I felt that was something that should be addressed. When your peer groups are saying, we've lost our way, come and join us. Well, I'm at the first of the queue for that.
We're at the edge of the cliff. Come on, follow us.
Exactly.
Yeah. It's I can't tell you how much this record meant to me. When you look back at it, it still has an amazing urgency, and a lot of it is obviously, and I don't know whether this is a good thing or a bad thing, but a lot of it's still quite relevant today. If you pick that album out, or you gave it anyone now and say, if you haven't heard this record, go and listen to this record, still says something. I'm still being told that, and I'm very happy, about that, because I think good writing is timeless. So if you address your themes carefully enough, you are looking at a pattern that repeats itself over and over again in the world, and unhappily that's how it is, And social comment records tend to actually always be relevant. Yeah. It's been lovely talking to you, Tim. Thank you very much for coming in. We'll finish with the Great British Mistake, but now you can help us out with this. Right. Now, Great British Mistake. You see, because the weird thing, having discussed this album at length, I didn't have the vinyl version, right, when it first came out. But was Great British Mistake, was that the last track on side 2?
Yeah.
Was it?
Oh no, I'm being tested.
So this, which I just dug out of my bag. So this is the weird thing. Because when the reissues came out, Great British Mistake is the last track on the album, and I was thinking, well, that's a bit weird. Take a look at this. This is the version I grew up on. The cassette version on Bright Records.
That.
Now have a look at the track listing on that.
Well, you know why that is, don't you? It's because it's so pressed for space that they had to change it around.
Look at that. All the tracks are on the wrong side, in the wrong order.
Well. But you do get a nice silver cover. That looks very classy.
Yeah. So the weird thing is, years after, so I'd grown up with the album in the wrong order.
Really, yeah. Well, of course, it's got to be the last track, hasn't it?
Yeah, it's got to be. Yeah.
I mean, Lecky even slowed down the tape to make that extraordinary ending. You know, literally by hand slowed the tape down.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, amazing. Well, this is the track we're talking about, which is either the end of side 1 if you've got the cassette, or side 2 officially if you've got the vinyl, or the reissues from Crossing the Red Sea with the Adverts. This is Great British Mistake. Tim, thank you so much.
Thanks,
Take care, fella. Cheers.